And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us, and one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it, and that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Tonight's episode, we're going to be joined by my guests, Laura and Bob. They both believe that their daughter was taken away from them by CPS due to some of the stuff that Laura believes is happening to her, which is conspiracy related with the government. There's been a lot of different things going on in her life, and she wants to come on here and share some of that information with the audience and hopefully be able to get their daughter back here soon. But before we bring them on, if you've ever had an experience or a story you'd like to share and you'd like to be on an episode of Tinfoil Tales, there's a couple things you can do. You can go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section, or you can email me directly at tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com. Either way, we'll get a message to me, so make sure to reach out and we will get something scheduled for a future episode. If you would like to help the podcast, you can share it around. Word of mouth is one of the best ways of helping the podcast. You can also leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to Tinfoil Tales at. So if you write a review for Apple, I'll try to find it and maybe give you a shout out for it. You can also help out by joining the Patreon. There's 2 different memberships. There's a free membership and the paid membership. The paid membership is $1.99 a month, so less than $2. But you get early access to all the episodes and they're all ad free. I personally hate all the ads on the episodes, so if that's something that you hate too, you may check into the Patreon. Make sure to follow me around on all the social medias. And if you're interested in some Tinfoil Tales swag, I've got shirts, stickers, and hats available, so make sure to reach out and I can hook you up with some. We're going to go ahead now and bring on Laura and Bob. It is a very sensitive and taboo subject, and I'm not here to try and prove or disprove anyone. I'm here just to give a platform. We're going to go ahead and dive on into it. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guests tonight, Laura and Bob. Thanks for coming on here and talking to me.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here. Very thankful for this opportunity.
Not a problem. Would you like to let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I am a victim to some of the conspiracy theories happening in our world right now, particularly a CIA psychological warfare victim with complex technologies. Just trying to share it so people understand the technology that's being used on them so that they can prepare themselves for what we're coming into and the one world order that they're trying to in place by 2030, and some herbal remedies and how to help it, and just some things I've learned along the way that I feel like going through the Satan technology through CIA, which means silent assassination through adaptive networks and kind of overcoming it through their technology. I just feel like I have a gift to offer the public on some of the treatments that they can take, and some of the intelligence that they're dealing with now that, rolled out and what happened with the, warp speed stuff. So that's what I'm trying to do, is get my story out there, let others know that they do it. If you're a U.S. citizen, you're not free. Citizen means slave. And I'm under Anna von Rice. I'm an American state national. we're under land law. We just went to land law. It was declared through the FEMA tragedies and that happened with the hurricanes and the lithium mines and all that, because they were blocking aid, and we can't have that for innocent people. We're dying because, the big people of the earth want that land, and it's a land grab. And I think I have information where you can get your status and standing to be able to fight these people, because you don't, as a citizen, they claim ownership over you. And I really, when I corrected my status and went not U.S. citizen, it's just paved a whole new way for me and being free. And, we have a global family bank. I get 5,000 AFDs put in there. So and then it gives me the status and standing of having my God-given unalienable rights. My children were taken from me on February 14th of 2022. And my boys have aged out. I've gone actually since April without talking to my sons very much at all. But today I was blessed with a 5-hour conversation, and a lot of it happened because they don't understand the technologies, and they don't understand that their biological dad was a Nazi, had the swastika tattooed on him, and was trying to make another species. So they don't understand the technology used on them, but it's starting to turn. My son is expecting. He's 20 years old. He was 17 when they came in 2022. So, he had to call me about genealogy stuff. Our daughter has cystic fibrosis. And again, we're in a CPS case. I found out that Bill Clinton signed a law in 1997. It's ASPA, the Protection and Permanency Act law. Well, with my daughter having a cystic fibrosis diagnosis from the technology that's been used on us, she's asymptomatic. I want to make that pretty clear. I use a lot of holistic and herbal and oils and frequency healings. But she happens to be one of those special needs cases where they were getting like $30,000 a day in federal money. So it is definitely a human trafficking ring, the CPS stuff. We've gone through lie after lie after lie. My husband is 67. I am 47. We have 4 grown children. My husband was a father, 3 months, or grandfather, 3 months before my daughter was born. And my daughter is one of those miracle babies because they were trying to use sterilization on me. And if you're into anything that Gates or any of them are doing, that is something they want to start growing babies in labs and not in the mother's womb, so that they can control every outcome of it, what color her eyes, if it's boy, if it's a girl, brown hair, blue, they've gotten that far with the genetics. So it's knowing that kind of stuff is going on kind of worldwide. I'm always thankful. It's a huge praise. I don't care that my son is 20. It's a huge praise that there's a baby, especially now with for the first time, like since the Black Plague, our birth rate is lower than our death rate. So their population control agenda is definitely, it's definitely coming away pretty good. You can find documents on stopthecrime.net. There's a population control document there. There's some documents about smart meters. CPS, they have started an investigation with Homeland Security and the smart meters. They talk about the smart meters. The smart meters are being wired to kill people. So that's, we had to get our smart meter off our house. It was making me very sick. And I think if a lot of people, knew they could opt out, it would just help the general public and all in all, because we wouldn't have as much of the EMF that we're dealing with.
Are you talking about the digital meters they put on the for electricity reading?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So anything labeled smart is in your biodigital convergence agenda stuff. And they are trying to make an internet of everything. That's IOET, an internet of bio-nano things, an internet of senses. And it goes into the WPAN and blockchain. So, and they're now, spraying our skies with smart dust. I've got all the patents. These are all conspiracy theories that are coming to light. So many people are waking up on social media, and social media keeps trying to censor it, but it's coming out slowly. I think it's coming out as people can handle it, because as much as I don't agree with censorship, this stuff can put people in so much fear if they're not ready to handle it. So in that sense, I do somewhat agree with it, but I know it's really annoying, and I know it's against our freedom of speech, and I know we're giving up our sovereignty, so I don't kind of like all that. But in a way, I can see the way the Lord's using it, because some people might just die of fear hearing some of this stuff if they're not spiritually able to digest it and put light to it instead of letting it be all darkness. And that's what you got your light workers for, your star seeds for, that have all come to earth right now. A lot of the Christians. Some of the Christians are just so utterly confused, though. My kids actually were put with a youth pastor at church, and he was only 24 years old, and that is one of the cases. Anyone that believes in the Bible and believes in God knows that family is the cornerstone, and Satan is the one that sifts and separates, and God is the one who unifies. So, when you got a church going into that. But I found out churches are 501c3 corporations, so they're still government. I was raised, there was a separation of government and state, and technically there isn't. I mean, if a church doesn't concede to what the government wants, it can just yank their license. So it does put our churches at the the mercy of the government, and that's something, for me in Scripture, we're told that he doesn't dwell in a building, he dwells in us. So it's real important to know thyself, to love thyself, to stay in a vibration of love, and be able to hear the truth and not be afraid. And if people, are so afraid, maybe it does need to be censored. I don't know. But I'm hoping this is the platform. I've prayed for God to open the door and for this to get out to people so that they get helped. And being that my intentions are good, I just have faith that it will.
I would like to start from kind of like from the beginning, like how you come about with all this information. Like, just for the listener, you're saying a bunch of things, but the average person.
In 2002, I was abducted, raped, and held hostage by an Aryan Brotherhood Nazi who had just gotten out of prison. He was in the KKK and the Grim Reapers, and my son just told me today the Outlaws. So, he had a lot of gang activity. I didn't realize until about 2 years ago when the border crisis was going on, and they said specifically on the news that the government was working with Aryan Brotherhood and Mexican cartel at the border. So he knew what he was doing. He confessed many, many things to me. I was not able to see. I thought he was crazy. I didn't believe our government was evil, or, especially I was raised Catholic. That was another reason why he chose me. We have like birth certificates and baptismal certificates that end up being money tools, the way the Pope has set it up. He confessed many things. I just didn't believe him. And now that COVID has happened and all the conspiracies are coming to light and that they were true, so much of what he told me was true. And it's just starting to make sense. They removed my children saying that I was mental, even though they were attacking me, and I was not. I was true in what I was saying. They just would have to admit so much guilt. So it's been a very hard hole to dig through. My daughter is we haven't seen her since May 18th. So, we're going through some suffering to be able to get this kind of information out. In the 10 maxims of law, suffering gives you credibility, and I'm just trying to take what suffering I've had and make it into light for the world.
At the end of the day, though, if they're taking your children, is it really worth the suffering of that to try and get this out there? I'm asking is from a parent's perspective. Like,
no, it's not, but it's where God's chose me to be. So, I got to take joy, and I got to take, glory in the steps that I am overcoming. But no, absolutely not, because it's absolutely traumatized my daughter. Part of why we were hit was we were creditors. I'm on disability. My husband is 67 and on Social Security, and we were getting $900 per child. So that was $2,700, per month. And my daughter had my husband and I every day of her life, all day long. So when they took her, and this is where I don't know that I want to say it because it probably will get centered. So I'll just leave that out. But this is where putting a child in extreme emotional trauma they can actually benefit from that. It's kind of like monsters. They get a substance from it. I don't feel like I can say it.
I know what you mean. Basically, it's the thing that everyone says that everyone's after these days. Starts with an A.
Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So that's what we're a survivor from. And we have A negative blood, which happens to be, the most expensive. So that's been something that has gone on with us. Thankfully, we're not in one of those severe cases like there are, I think, in other countries, because we do have some laws here, because some of these babies die to get that substance, and, it is their fountain of youth. So yeah, it's all that. And my ex confessed it to me. I mean, I just didn't understand when he was. Like, it didn't make sense, and that's why, I've never said anything until after and things are coming out, because of course anybody's going to think you're crazy. I thought he was crazy for telling me, and now I kind of feel guilty for not believing him, like maybe I could have helped him more. But my ex killed his own dad at 14 and was in a mental hospital for 4 years, and then he got in trouble and was in prison for 6. And they definitely drain that stuff in prison in your 20-year-olds, and they, experiment on people in mental homes. So I feel like even though he hurt me, that he was a victim too. And that gives me the grace and mercy from the Lord to, pray for him. I've prayed for my enemy. I don't think that he meant a lot of it. I think he was so entrapped by fear that, he felt like he had to comply. And, for me, for a very long time, I was trapped in that same fear. I finally left him in 2009, but, it was just that fear that he was going to kill me. And that's constantly, he was going to kill my family, and I had to overcome my fear of death. I mean, that's ultimately what it came down to. I couldn't have that darkness of fear in me because I'm supposed to be a child of light. Does that help any?
Personally, for me, I don't know if what I would do that or not, just because the whole children aspect. I love my children, and I'm going to do whatever I can to protect my kids and be with my kids. So if they tell me I can't have this podcast anymore, I guess I'm done with the podcast. But
well, no, I understand that. I really do. But at the same time, like, we've learned about how our Wi-Fi is putting mold and different EMFs and I think even yeast. So, I just have to do some stuff to make sure that my house is okay for her to come home to. And for one of that is going to be a cease and desist to the FBI and the CIA and the World Economic Forum and the people that are behind this, like DARPA. And I'm starting to work on that this week. It's just paperwork. But if I don't declare and I don't fight for my rights, and I know that it's happening and I don't say anything, then, I haven't fought for my rights, and you don't have rights if you don't fight for them. So that's kind of my plan of action. I have a lot of faith that it's going to work. But because it's hard when you think if your kid comes home, they might be in a not so safe environment. There is a girl named Sabrina Wallace that teaches on the Rumble channel. Her name's PS Energy. She teaches about the biodigital convergence, and a lot of what she says makes sense. So I'm trying to get rid of some of the electronics because we've got all kinds, AI. Not that I disagree with, using any of that. I just personally, I am sensitive to EMF fields, and maybe my daughter is too. And when I think about the safety from a mature part, we had 2 houses when this started. So some of this was like just stealing our assets for the government. But now we live in Louisville, Kentucky, and we are in a smart city. And so I did an antenna search. Well, there's 889 antennas by me. So, and that's within 3 miles. That's a 3-mile radius. I don't know outside of that. There's probably even more. The airport, the Louisville International Airport, is maybe 6 streets away. I don't know. They took part of our neighborhood for it. UPS is next to that. Ford is next to that. So, in the area where I am, it is, highly, there's very high EMF fields. You can go to Florida Sky Watchers on Facebook, and you'll see at night, sometimes they're letting the radar go off in the same line that hurricane went in, where the towers are, because they're putting EMF fields out there. They're kind of like microwaving us, I guess you could say. So, and a lot of people are talking about that. We got a lot of sky watchers now. 10 years ago, it was nowhere where it is today. And people are starting to wake up. And we're at the point in time where if people don't wake up, their soul is greatly at risk. We're coming upon that mark of the beast, So that's why I feel it's important to get my story out there to save as many people and to make them aware, and maybe give them some remedies that I have used to get me through the technology, like ionic foot detoxes that most people haven't heard about.
Now, when it comes to the technologies, can you elaborate a little bit of like how you know these technologies, like how you've discovered them?
Well, graphene oxide looks like pepper flakes coming out. Some of it was my ex telling me, and he actually was holding EMF detectors up to us. So I knew it had something to do with EMF. But I left him in 2009. I didn't figure this out until, I knew I was sensitive to EMF fields, but I didn't find out about the biodigital convergence until probably March of this year. So part of it is me trusting God with my kid. I mean, my kid might be safer outside of my home right now, and that's hard to admit. But it's getting entangled in whatever they tangled me in. And so it's sometimes harder to do. And I didn't always understand it until I found Sabrina Wallace on Rumble and started learning. And, my ex tried to prostitute me. He was pointing a phone at me with this other dude. I ended up in the Center for Women and Families for 9 months that time, just because I was raised Catholic and Christian. You don't do that stuff. That's satanic stuff, but yeah, they were trying to actually program me with it, holding their phones up. And now I think it's funny. I mean, and I see where I was sealed. I see where I'm in the Lamb's Book of Life, and they really couldn't touch me the way they wanted to. So that was a huge blessing for me that I felt that night. But I still didn't understand what was going on. And when I left, I had 105 temperature for 2 weeks while I was in the Center for Women and Families. And my ex, when he had visitation, he used to tell me he was poisoning my kids. And I would take them to the hospital and they'd be like, well, you just give them some ibuprofen and some Tylenol and some Pedialyte. I would do that. My son stayed sick for 10 days, would miss a whole week of school. And when I really prayed, when I really humbled myself, and when I really had faith, our neighbor told me about a woman doing ionic foot detoxes. And I was like, oh, well, I need a detox. I started detoxing, and I know a lot of people don't believe in them because that's the way we're programmed and that's the way they put it out. But I've got pictures of hookworms and teeth in my water. I've got pictures, and I've went to the doctors. Doctors can't tell you if you have parasites. They would tell me if I lived in the United States, I didn't have parasites. Well, now Pfizer is getting sued because there was parasites in there by like 5 or 6 states. So, the time is now when maybe people can realize.
Just from an outsider's perspective, trying to see things from like the listener's perspective, I guess. How does someone know that everything that you're saying isn't just the ramblings of someone that's like delusional? And I mean that not like disrespectful, but I mean like the average person going to hear someone, again, that's what falls into the category, because when you talk with people, the average person doesn't believe in all of this stuff.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean, because I'm giving resources. StopTheCrime.net, Sabrina Wallace on PS Energy. There's DARPA papers, there's IEEE papers, there's CIA papers. There is a person on YouTube named David A. who does stuff on targeted individuals. He's been reading the Soul Catcher book from the CIA. So he's got it, I think, in 3 parts, but it did make it to YouTube. So that was kind of giving me hope that this might too. He has also, said that I could be on his cast as a targeted individual, because I just have so much going on. And that's been a lot of it, is untangling the web that I've been in that I didn't even know.
I always ask this question because I've interviewed other people that have said they've been targeted. One of my last episodes was actually about targeted individuals and how the guys turned into a positive thing. But why do you believe that you were targeted? Like, of everyone out there, why specifically you?
I mean, he told me why I was targeted. It was for being Catholic and to drain the money from my trust. And then I have I have A negative blood. It does not run on iron. It runs on like copper or gold, one of the two. I'm extremely allergic to metals. And that's why a lot of these heavy metals that they're using that are causing the ADHD and the autism and the dementia, they don't affect me. And I just look at it as God went before me. My mom wasn't allergic to metals until she got pregnant with me. So I have that part.
Now, when it comes to stuff like this and diving into conspiracies, I think is a slippery slope in general, because there's a lot of stuff out there that I think is not 100% true. And I think people are using that as pushing the narrative to get away from the real stuff. So it's hard to find legitimate stuff, because a lot of things might have a hint of truth to it. But I also think there's a lot of misinformation spread in there too. And I see people on social media are notorious for doing this, but they start sharing stuff and they share more stuff. And then it becomes like true to everyone, even though the fact is, if they go back and look about it, it's not true. Literally, we'll use these recent hurricanes as an example. They said there's never been a hurricane that came in through the Gulf. Never in the history. And they've had 2 in the last couple of weeks. I was like, well, where is New Orleans at? It's in the Gulf. Where's Houston at? It's in the Gulf. Like, those are literally big hurricanes that came up through the Gulf. So, no, but point is, they were sharing stuff saying they've never been through the Gulf before. They always come from the Atlantic. I was like, that's not true. And everyone keeps sharing that. I was like, I understand what they're saying, but you're not sharing factual stuff, so therefore you're discrediting the whole thing.
Right. I understand what you're saying there too. You are correct. Absolutely. I like your eye. Because I didn't see that. But you are absolutely, because I've heard that too and believed it.
Like that's how I am, far as I try and look at things not so much skeptically, but more rationally and to an extent. Like I want to believe these things, but at the same time, I want to try and rule out some of the BS that comes along with it and trying to spin it as there's never been hurricanes that came up through the Gulf before. I mean, that's just not true. So if you're trying to say that they were man-made and they're using them as weapons, you have to look into the fact that you're just now also said they've never came through the Gulf of Mexico before. So you just discredited your own information. So that's why I always say it's a slippery slope, because there's a lot of things that are interesting, but you have to make sure that all the facts line up. Otherwise, it's going to get ridiculed and destroyed, and you're just going to be labeled as another one of those tinfoil hat wearers.
Right. Yes, that's what I'm working with on my paperwork. You have to be very precise and very, you do one bullet at a time, because if they can rebut anything in your statement, the whole statement is false. So I'm very glad you brought that to my attention. Did I say that? Because I've heard that. I might have repeated it.
You didn't. No, you didn't. You didn't say it, but I've seen it all over the internet.
Yeah, I have too. But I didn't think of that, and you are absolutely correct. So
I've also seen other things recently about stuff that I don't even want to bring up, but like I know for a fact that if you go back and just look like the last 15 years, that is not true, but people are spreading it as it's true. And I was like, whatever. Like you can't change people's minds. That is also the issue, especially when someone 100% is so invested in these rabbit holes that they got so deep into that they can't come out of them. So
I think the rabbit hole in scripture is called the bottomless pit. Like in Revelation, we're really not supposed to go in it. We're supposed to trust him. So anytime you go in a rabbit hole, you have to be guarded, in my opinion. And truth is like the number one thing, like you just said, and it means so much to me. So, that's what I've been ironing out for 15 years since I left him. So that when I did come forth, I didn't hurt him. I had the facts straight. And I have my husband for the rational part. He's, my other half and on here, and he's the one that brings me down like you kind of just did, So we balance each other out perfect.
You have to have the anchor to keep you from floating off, or the rope to tie off to something so you don't fall too down in the hole. The references I'm making, but I'm trying to be lighthearted about it. But it's true though that a lot of people can get too invested into things and they become obsessed with it. I've noticed this with other people, not even just with conspiracies, but other things in general. Like they become so obsessed with stuff that it consumes them to the point to where even if they're not getting the reaction or the information they're wanting, they will go ahead and manufacture it some way or form and manipulate things into being what they're wanting for that outcome. And all the work that they've done has literally just been discredited because the things that they're trying to prove, they went ahead and faked it to make everyone else believe them. So therefore, you just ruined everything you've done.
Right. That or they don't understand it. Some of them come forth not understanding it. I think that's, for me, a lot of it has just flowed through prayer. I haven't really had to go down rabbit holes. It just kind of comes to me. It'll pop up on Facebook. So sometimes I'm kind of like, maybe they are trying to get me out. They're not censoring me, or they're not censoring what's coming to me. They do censor what goes out. But in a way, I kind of feel like I can handle it. And maybe they know that now, but it's just kind of come to me. And I don't have to like strive for it. What I'm really striving for and what I'm into at the moment is I'm the Kentucky state coordinator. And being disabled, I'm doing like 40 hours a week, and my husband is the ombudsman, and we're trying to bring back our lawful government where, and right now we're working on since October 8th. Tomorrow we got a meeting set up to get notes out to our sheriffs to let them know that they're under land law and no longer under statute law. So, it's going to take a while. We got like a peacekeeping task force. It's not going to be a shift that just happens overnight. But the fact that it's starting to happen is really good. FEMA's got funding for another 3 months, so we kind of don't understand that. But that kind of keeps me from actually going down the rabbit holes. I'm working a lot, and like I said, a lot of it just comes to me. I'll go to a meeting, or somebody will pop this up, or actually some through Facebook. So it's not something I've had to strive for as far as researching, or I always tried, and we had 8 years apiece. So until these tires went up and all this happened, we had 8 years apiece where we didn't talk about it, think about it. We had a normal life, kids in school. My kids were scouts. My oldest got his Eagle Scout. My middle is 13 months younger than my oldest, but hit during. And then they were doing fires on, let's do a Zoom call and build a fire. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean, but if you make a real fire, you don't want a fire on a Zoom call. I mean, you want that real fire. So we liked nature. We liked being out in nature, in the woods, that kind of stuff. So it was great because my ex signed over his rights and my husband adopted my sons. And, we had that peaceful time where I was able to, just pour in the word of God. When they took my kids, I was a Sunday school teacher at our church. And so a lot of that is just waiting on his timing. And I feel like I've done that before I started speaking.
I don't want to pry in to too much information because I don't know what all you're comfortable with sharing, but I know I'll be asked why I never asked this. So I'm just going to ask, what was their reasoning for taking the children?
So some of our stuff from shipment providers was coming tainted. My arrays were coming brown. Some of my pills, you could see the graphene oxide in. There was some weird things going on in my house. We could feel it. And it all started after COVID. We had the cops there a couple of times. They didn't take the kids. When I unplugged my router, my son said he was calling CPS, and he didn't. He called our youth pastor, but I called the cops. They were wanting to test for carbon monoxide, and we did have a carbon monoxide detector. It was just on the shelf. And so after all that went down, I went to a hotel room. We had 2 houses. My husband was in Louisville. He went back to the house we were at in Hardin County. My thyroid, my TSH went up to 95, and my husband's kidney function went down to 5%, and his blood pressure, he almost died. He was hospitalized. So we stayed in a hotel room for like 3 months. We drained a lot of the money we had saved up for retirement. So now we're just literally living off our disability and Social Security. We do have those AFDs in the account for when money switches over. But that bank is not technically up and usable at this current time. It's more in a work in progress. So does that help answer that?
A little bit. Like I said, I'm not trying to be prying into anyone's personal information, but I know.
Oh, I didn't. So when he called the youth pastor, I called the cops. And when I called the cops, he ran outside and said that I had strangled him when I unplugged the router. And he had been listening to Ed Sheeran downstairs on an Echo Dot on repeat, and I had been up for 3 days. I was not able to sleep for 3 days. So I unplugged the router, and I had finally fallen asleep, and he says I strangled him. My son was 6 feet tall, and I did not strangle him. But that's what he said. He had no marks. There was no proof of harm. They just came in and said they were taking him because I was mental. And that is what they have continued to say.
That's kind of what makes me concerned, like with talking about stuff like this, because if it gets out there, can't they use that against you? Like, isn't that giving them more stuff to pile on to claim that, look, she's talking about all this weird stuff, and use it against you to not get your kids back? Absolutely not. The truth will always overcome. And the truth is being brought to light right now. And that's
it needs to get out because I have all kinds of other CPS victims. We're making groups. We know what's going on. We know our kids are being trafficked. We know that they're making false reports. And so does Homeland Security. I have a TikTok page that they've taken down at Laura Domek. I've started a new one at Laura Murphy Domek, but it's got a lot of these resources on there that I'm surprised have not been censored. It's got some Rockefeller stuff on there. It's got some of the A stuff on there. I'm surprised. But it's my third TikTok account. So, I try to, and at the same time, I told you earlier, somewhat I can understand because I don't want to put anybody in so much fear that, some things I'm kind of in agreement need censored on or educated before they're discussed. Because the last thing you want to do is discuss some horrible trauma without any solution to it. And that's another thing, I have solutions. That's why I'm telling people ionic foot detoxes, cilantro for the metal. There's a lot of natural remedies, and they've come up with the nicotine helping people with the stuff that is starting to spread since 2020. So, just a lot of things that people haven't heard of or wouldn't even imagine. We've been taught nicotine is bad for so long, but nicotine is in your bell peppers. It's in your eggplants. It's in your tomatoes. And it's truly not addictive. When the companies went up, the tobacco companies, 5 of the CEOs of the companies testified nicotine is not addictive. So it's more or less the other chemicals that are added in the processing of the tobacco.
So I'm not real familiar with that. I don't smoke and never have done tobacco products. So for me,
I had quit smoking, okay, because my mom died a horrible death. She had cancer and she ended up having a heart attack, and they had to open her up on Valentine's Day of 2019. I seen my mom's heart beating and her lungs breathing, and she was a smoker. So after I seen all that, I quit. But when I got COVID in 2021, that's when I started smoking again. And I was like, for whatever reason, it's getting out of my lungs. And now, a lot of the studies are showing that it attaches to the same receptors as some of the other stuff that's out there right now.
No. So again, I'm not a big tobacco supporter, so no one will ever hear me telling anyone to support big tobacco because, again, I'm not a big pharma, big tobacco, big corporation, big anything. I'm very much not for any of that stuff. So,
well, they on Dr. Artist today, they showed where they used a patch for 6 days, and it was very promising for the people that were, still ill from stuff that happened in 2020. So I thought it was great on that aspect. And for me, I was like, well, I guess the spirit was leading and I didn't even know. But cigarettes is not the choice. It's like they got gum pops, and a lot of people are saying just get organic tobacco leaves and eat them, or I've heard all kinds of different stuff at this point, but it is the nicotine that is helping. So I think that gives some kind of, I don't know, remedy. But it is kind of crazy. Who'd have thought? That's one of those. But now, there's several doctors that are saying that. So, and we've actually discussed that on the assemblies too. So it does have health benefits. It's just been one of those things. Well, the cigarettes don't because of the chemicals, but the nicotine, like in our tomatoes and stuff, we have receptors for it, is my point. And it will plug the same receptors as the stuff in 2020 does. And then it helps dismantle it, is what they were proving today when I seen the Dr. Artist show. So somebody just kind of sent me that. I have a lot of that. That's, it's kind of a group effort. When I say I haven't had to strive, people will see something and they'll send me a video, and it's just like being given to me at the moment.
Right. No, I understand that. Is there anything else you would like to discuss before we start to wrap this one up, though?
Um, honey,
I don't know. There was a couple things that he asked you that you really didn't answer all the way. You can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. That night that they took the kids, Trenton, the older one, okay, he had already been institutionalized 5 times. He, in September, no, it was October of 2019, he hit his mother at church, and he hit another woman at church and stomped on her chest. And then he came home and he attacked me from behind. So he went to jail. So when they came and took the kids a few months later, after Tyler did his thing and they took the kids outside, the cops talked to him and they wouldn't let Laura out there. The court gave me domestic violence for Trenton hitting me. I never touched the kid. So they automatically had a strike against me by saying that, well, I committed domestic violence because it was my fault that he hit me. So they already had it out a couple of months beforehand. And that last day on Thanksgiving, it was the last straw. And so in the beginning at court, they said the kids couldn't come home because Laura smoked pot. And that was just a ploy to get us to take a mental evaluation. But it had to be their state-paid doctor to do it. And we found out since 95% of mental evaluations result in you being called mental because they don't have to have proof. They just have to have somebody say it. And that's what that doctor did. So that's the biggest reason why they have kept the kids. Well, now it's Sarah, but that's their way of getting kids away. They don't have to prove a thing, nothing. And they have never had any proof. They've never had any proof of harm. They've never had any injuries, nothing. And if you're going to listen to 2 boys who, like I said, one's been institutionalized 5 times, and one of the time he was because he wrote a suicide note. Another time he told the doctor he wanted to kill himself. And then the second one's been institutionalized a couple times. And they took the word of those 2 over myself, which I've never had any problem, and Laura, who's been nothing but the greatest mother. They didn't care. They had an agenda. They had an agenda from the beginning, and that's what they were going to do. They knew exactly what they were going to do the minute they took those kids away.
It's strange to me that it is always that way, though, because I have a friend, and I won't name names or anything about the situation, but the friend, his son was angry at him over video game stuff, I believe it was. So he called the police and said that his father was choking him. He had no marks and nothing, and his father was arrested for it. So my friend got arrested at one point because he was supposedly strangling his son, and he says he never laid a hand on him. There was no marks. I don't think that anything happened. I know he bailed himself out, and I think there was no, charges pressed afterward. I think it was all dropped or whatever, but just because someone makes the call and says this happened, they automatically arrest somebody, which is with no proof.
Exactly. That's what they do. We are running into so many CPS cases from people that nothing's ever been proven. There's never been proof of harm. And if there's not a victim, there is no crime. But they don't care. They make their own rules. They do what they want. In our case, the judge, she used to be a CPS prosecutor, and now she's prosecuting CPS cases. Now, tell me that's not a conflict of interest.
Right.
They knew what they were going to do right from the beginning.
Yeah. The situation, after you've explained it, it does sound even more bizarre. But
People that have known us all our life, all my life. I mean, I've only known Laura since 2012, but I mean, heck, I was a Boy Scout leader for 20 years. I've never had any problem, no domestic problems, never. And I told the judge, I said, there was never any domestic violence in my house until the boys came and I adopted them. Then that's when it started. So, I mean, why can't you look at my track record and see, well, God, he's got 2 adult kids. He's never had a problem like that. Why all of a sudden now he's got a problem? It was just an agenda. That's what all this stuff is. It's they make a plan and they go about it and they make sure they're trying to drive us crazy is what they're trying to do, but it's not going to work. But it's ridiculous. It's a shame that our country is being run by this. And the county that this happened in has been being investigated for 17 years for stuff like this. So, I mean, there's something wrong there, something very wrong. And I just don't get it. I just don't get it. You're ruining people's lives over your agenda, your lies. I mean, at one point, we got a letter from CPS that said, well, you can't provide housing. We had 2 houses, both fully paid for. You can't provide clothing. You can't provide education, which we were paying $450 a month for Sarah to go to a private school, and we couldn't provide food. Our house has always had plenty of food. And then for continued abuse and neglect, no proof, just those 2 words. That's it.
Now, where is your daughter at? Is she with people you know, or do they put her through the foster care system?
They put her.
She went through the foster care. I need to speak, honey, because I need to add to some of the stuff my hand is raised. She is with my 3rd cousin in Indiana, and I just found out today that she's with a sheriff. I didn't realize my cousin's husband was a sheriff, so that could be very positive on returning her. I will not feel safe until I get cease and desist to the CIA and FBI, and I know that some of this electromagnetic isn't happening in our home. I think that maybe some of it, I mean, let him who be deceived, and now that I'm waking up to the truth and I can figure out how to really protect my kid, maybe they won't call me mental. My son went to jail for 4 days when he beat up my husband too. And it was that they told me that I couldn't, when he hit me and the other woman at church, they told me I couldn't press charges. So what it was Bob was pressing charges on my son because we wanted him to go through anger management. And, there was a judge in Hardin County that was hearing our case before it got to the CPS judge, and she said that he was going to go through anger management. And then when we went to the next case, the CPS case had started, so she turned it over. Well, CPS never, ever, ever let my kid go through anger management, and he probably needed it. The girl that he hit at church, it was on camera. He blacked her eye and he stomped on her chest, and she was like a size 4. And she didn't press charges because she had a warrant. So when it came to Bob, he's like, this 3rd strike, you're out. We've got to do something. He's got to know he can't go around hitting people. So we felt like we were doing what was right for our kids. But another thing is when CPS did take my kids that I thought my husband was going to say and placed him with this youth pastor, for starters, they had talked to their biological dad for the first time, like in years, the night before, and they wouldn't do it in front of me. And then as soon as they got taken by CPS, they started seeing him against our wishes. And they did that by putting him with a fictive kin so that CPS wasn't really, they weren't the ones the fictive kin was. But when my son wrote that suicide note in 2020, just 2 years before, we had an open CPS case because he had to be hospitalized and that kind of thing. And at that time, I'm losing my train of thought. I'm sorry. I do that sometimes. But at that time, our CPS worker, Matthew Kelly, had an aftercare and CPS orders that my kids have no contact with their biological dad. So when they took them, I mean, they even went against their own recommendations. And then in our forensic mental evaluation, it literally says that my husband hits our daughter when she's trying to hug him. I mean, the lies are so preposterous. It's just, I can't even sit down to read them all. And then they won't even give us our own forensic mental evaluation. So, I had my doctor's office call me, and I told her straight up last week they wanted me to schedule a primary care. And I said, well, what has taken place since 2020? I am not comfortable going to your facility, because I went in and told the doctor I was doing ionic foot detoxes and parasites were coming out. And I had pictures, and she said I was delusional. So, I lost my kids, and they're calling me mental when I've got the proof right in front of me, but nobody will investigate it. Why won't you come investigate it? You could be testing my detox water. Why won't you give me the resources? You see what I'm saying? They're not trying to help me. There's no doubt they're involved and they're corrupt. I mean, the lies, everything we've been, and just everything we've been subject to. If it was truth, that's kind of what we were very cooperative in the beginning, because we thought they were there to help. But then once we realized they were only hurting us, I mean, we drew back, and now we know so much that, like, we never had to let them in the house. We don't consent. We've told them over and over we don't consent, and we don't have a contract with them. So there's lots of things where they're overstepping their ground, and, we're ending up in high-class courts. We're looking at federal and Supreme Court. But for me, I try to stay out of courts because I'm a peaceful person, and I've sent, notices to the Secretary of State that I do want to settle it out of court. I put liens on these people because what they're doing is against our rights, and they won't even admit to perjury. And I've called them out, and I've wrote affidavits, and they're not responding to them. They're just bulldozing. It really is an agenda. There's no laws being followed, none whatsoever. They wanted money. The country was getting ready to go bankrupt, so they were grabbing kids, and they done it to kids all across the nation. It's actually going on worldwide. Well, they still went bankrupt on October 1st. And when they finally do fold, my liens are going to, come to pass. So that's something, that I'm trying to do, because if they don't have consequences, they're going to keep doing this to other people. It's like we keep letting them stick their hand in the candy jar, but they're not, when you're a kid, or like, instant. When I was raising my kids, I was with my mother. They could throw their sippy cup down 50 times, and I would pick it up every time. And my mom's father like, no. And our girl that teaches the class, she uses the same scenario. But, my mom would be the one that got fed up and was like, no, they're not getting it anymore. They're suffering a consequence until they learn, not to do this anymore. Well, I mean, our courts need reform. They're greatly hurting our people. They just are. They're not following the laws, and people are suffering because of it. And that's every state. They're, go ahead.
I was going to say, you'd mentioned your daughter is with a relative. Was she sent there by choice? Like, did you have any say? Like, how did that all go about?
Yes, we had a choice.
Okay. Because
yes, we did. This was her fifth home, though. This was her fifth home, and she had been in 2 foster homes prior. And at one point, they sent her to Arkansas illegally back on Thanksgiving week to Bob's sister, who just died on August 16th. And then they wouldn't even let her go to the funeral. But it was when we got in there, now the judge did get on the worker, and she had to bring her back because she did it, without an ICPC. And then, we knew Rita wasn't doing well. I mean, but they had her as 9 out of 10 health. And we're trying to tell them, and I guess I'm glad my daughter didn't have to watch that. And she is with a younger couple that have a little boy her age, And she grew up, when she was born, her brothers were 10 and 11 and shortly turned 11 and 12. My oldest is 16 days after hers, and then my middle child's July 1st, and my daughter's is May 2nd. So, but she had kids there. It's like she had 4 adults taking care of her.
Right. Well, I hope everything can get situated. I understand the heartache and the frustrations and everything else that goes along with it, especially when it has something to do with the judicial system in this country, and not just here. From what I've heard from other people in other countries too, it's really screwed up everywhere. But I can't imagine being away from my children, so I don't even want to think about it. So I can't imagine how it would be for you guys to not have your daughter with you.
I said, especially with us having a nice, peaceful time and being with her every moment of the day. I mean, that's hard to break from. It is.
Yeah.
In the beginning, it was almost not worth going to visitation because she would hang on to our leg and cry and beg not to be taken from Mommy. And about a year into it, she said, "It's okay, Mom. I'm getting used to it." And I got a really strong daughter. She's got my strength, so I'm proud of her. And she hasn't lost her love for us all through this. So it's pretty beautiful in that, but the innocence of a child, why they're so special. You have them.
Mm-hmm. I feel for you.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to tear up, but that was probably the hardest part of this whole thing, was watching my daughter throw these horrible fits and not want to leave.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine.
Because you feel helpless. You feel helpless. Like, you want to stop your child from crying. You got that natural thing as a mom, and there's nothing you can do. And it's complete surrender. You have to trust him in those moments. So even though they're really hard, I'm glad that I've gotten stronger with my Creator.
Mm-hmm. Well, we can probably get close to wrapping this one up, but before we do, I want to say, is there anything else that you would like to discuss beforehand with Bob or yourself?
Honey?
Yeah, the fact that, Sarah was born 2016, May 2nd. I had a heart attack in July 7th. While I was in the hospital, I decided I was going to retire because I wanted to be there. So I retired at the end of that year. But like Laura said, every day she had both of us. Every day until she went to school. And the fact that they said we couldn't provide education, Sarah started school when she was 3. She went 2 years to preschool. Then she went to kindergarten, which is where the private school was. That's where she went. And the audacity to say that we can't provide education. She's 8 years old. She's in her 6th year of school. So the whole thing is ridiculous. I just don't get it. And somebody's got to call CPS out. Somebody's got to call them out. And supposedly CPS don't exist anymore. But it's just business as usual, that nothing's changed. But I don't know. It's
Chevron difference.
Chevron difference, yeah.
You guys are in Kentucky, right? I'm not familiar with how each state has with their own laws and everything else, but I'm in Indiana. I know we still have CPS here because my friend's wife is actually like the county person that's head of one of the counties around here. But I don't know. When you mentioned she went to different states, I didn't think they could do that. That's why I was kind of curious, because I thought they had to leave the children in the same state as where they're from. Maybe that's just around here, or maybe I'm completely wrong. I don't know.
Well,
that's what the ICPC is. That's what they got to have to move them. And with ours being family, both times that she went over state lines, it was with family. They can't move them like they're not supposed to. They do, they're not supposed to move them within foster homes out of the state if they can avoid it. So, and our daughter is actually in Indiana. She's in Harrison County.
I'm not sure where that's. That must be down south.
It is. It's near Corydon. They live in like Elizabeth, Indiana.
Okay, yeah.
That real. So that's actually where she is, and they are good people. Like I said, he's a sheriff. You know, I didn't care. He called yelling at us about being sovereign citizens. I wonder how he's going to take being under land law. But you know, that's all things that are getting worked out through the military and PTKF. I'm just a coordinator putting everybody together and mailing the sheriff letters. So
I actually want to touch base on that before we wrap that up. What exactly is that? Because I'm confused on the whole thing.
So we went under land law on October 5th. It was declared land law because of the the state that we were in with the natural disaster. So, and how the response was being handled. So that's why we went under land law, and it's the sheriffs, and it's some part of the military, but it's not like the Navy or the Marines or the that I still have to ask Anna Von Rice about. So we have it's got 8 different steps for the sheriffs, and that's what we're coming out with to mail. I can actually look it up on my phone and read it to you if you want me to.
No, I can look it up. I'm just confused as to, you're saying we're in land law. I've never seen anything stating that. So
that's why we're getting the notices out to the sheriffs, because it just happened. And it is all across the United States. Like I know Illinois have already gotten theirs out because I'm using their templates to be able to mail mine. And we're starting with the Sheriff's Association, and see where Kentucky is kind of difficult is we got 120 counties. So we got to cover 120 counties and getting these notices out. And some of them, they want at least mailed priority, so we have proof that they have been informed. I mean, and some of them are really going to like it, but some of them may not. And I don't know how the one taking it, because the one that has my daughter, he is a sheriff. I don't know how he will take it, because he did not like that he called us sovereign citizens, which we are not. We're American state nationals. So, and we claim land and soil jurisdiction. So when you look at law, you have, the land, the air, and the water. The Brits are over the water, the Pope is over the air, and each country has their land. So that's kind of where law came from my studies, now that I'm studying, common law. So land law is common law. And technically our courts, when our forefathers came up, were supposed to be going under common law. And somehow that got hijacked. And it's been statutory law. And that's more of British law than American law. So we're trying to bring back the American and what the forefathers were doing. We're just kind of doing it backwards. They set up from county on up to state. And since we're doing it, with Americans and citizens coming back to the land and soil, we set up the state first and then the counties. We do it a little backwards. But we are truly we the people. Like that's where it comes into. That's what we claim. We have unalienable rights, and one of them is right to raise your own child. And, it just comes down to they've done all this for money so that the country doesn't go bankrupt. And it still is. So that's, I'm hopeful for the next 3 months. And we didn't even celebrate Christmas last year. The Lord's kind of told me it's pagan, but, I thought, well, we don't have to call it Christmas. We can, just call it a party. But I'd like to have my daughter home by Christmas. The first year she was gone, they actually let her stay the night with us and had Justin stay here with us, my husband's son. And, that was really nice. And we all got together for Christmas. But last year, we had no Christmas. None at all. So hopefully this year it happens by then. But I do know there's funding going on to January. So I'm not getting my hopes up too much because, that can be shattering if I plan her home by Christmas and she doesn't,
No. Well,
that's my hopes.
I hope it works out for you guys. I really do.
I will email you that order to the sheriff that we're sending out.
Okay.
So that you can read it. That way you don't have to go for a search on it.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. But I think we can wrap this one up. It's getting a little bit late for me. I got work in the morning, but I do want to say I appreciate both you guys coming on here and talking with me tonight.
Yes, we appreciate you giving us some space to try and help other people. I get on the CPS pages and I tell them land law and they're kind of confused too. But I think once we get some sheriffs, I think there's a lot of innocent moms without their kids. I will never doubt that there needs to be some kind of child care service because there are people that are hurting it. But I think we're giving our kids over to the people that are hurting them. They're the ones that they need protected from. It's not really the parents. They've just, made it seem that way. Most parents are not going to hurt their kids, but I know things are getting crazy and you got women drowning them, and I know, I see, because I could never imagine. I couldn't imagine hurting my kids.
Right.
And, so the service is needed, just not how it is now. It shouldn't be for profit. I think if you took that profit and what Bill Clinton did, signing that Protection and Permanency Act, I think if it wasn't for profit, it would be a lot more ethical. But when money is involved, they want the money, and best interest kind of fails. And that includes for the child and for the family in general. And one more thing I wanted to bring up. While we were paying $450, and while they're saying that we can't provide school for her, okay, when they removed her out of our home, she flunked kindergarten. We paid for kindergarten twice in a private school. So the not providing school and the trauma they caused her the first year, our daughter's highly intelligent, has been since she was born. She's reading, been reading for a while. She really memorized the Brown Bear book. I used to be a teacher. That's what I did before I was disabled, and I worked with special needs kids. So that's the other thing. Let's take the kids away from a teacher just because she's disabled, and we're trying to, let her meet the Lord early. So I don't doubt my skills, and they were trying to get me to. And that I do feel that, is something I overcome, when they're telling you how bad you are and you're like, no, not really. No. And you see that it's for money. I mean, I've taken growth and development. I've worked with special needs kids, autistic and Down syndrome kids. And that was some of the most special bonds I ever had. I was closer to them than the regular kids. And some of them were nonverbal. I mean, but they were grateful. They knew they needed you, where the other kids didn't think they needed you at all. So it was just a different bond. And I'm thankful for both experiences in my life. But, I knew how to raise kids. I knew how to teach them how to read. I knew all the growth and development toys to buy. My daughter had a whole basement full of toys. And she had a very good life. And to make it out otherwise really puts us down. And, I don't agree, and we'll never agree. And it's not the truth. So I think unless Bob has anything else, but, it is kind of crazy that they bring up the school, and then when they had her, she flunked. So
Yeah.
Who's not providing school? Because I was even teaching her at home.
Do you have anything else, Bob, or are you good?
No, I'm good. I appreciate you allowing us to get on this call.
Yeah, not a problem. I'm glad I could have you guys on here, and hopefully, I don't know how much good it could do, but I always try and feel like I'm trying to help people. So hopefully this is something that helps.
Well, hopefully you get some rest tonight. If you got to work, don't worry.
Yep. So I got 4 kids of my own and a full-time job, and then I try and do podcast out here at nighttime when the other kids go to sleep. So that's my lifestyle. Thank you. You too. I hope it all works out for you guys for the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. I really do appreciate this. I'm so grateful for the opportunity, and I will blanket it in prayer that it also helps people. And I'm glad that we're together on that same goal, that it is to help people. Because, really, when it comes down to it, it's not about me or this or that. It's about trying to help other people.
Yeah.
I've already been helped, and that's why I kind of want it out there on what's helped me. There was one thing I wanted to add, because he was talking about, me using the marijuana. I have been disabled since 2011. I have like 50 diagnoses on me. That alone took care of 30 pills. I was on 30 pills when I had a stent placed in my subclavian artery back in 2013. So, I know a lot of people were very controversial on that, but Kentucky did start offering the medicinal marijuana card, and I got that on January 3rd of 2023. So, and I still couldn't go to all the pharmaceuticals. I couldn't go back to that many. I didn't have a brain. They had me on fentanyl. They had me on Xanax. They had me on Somas. They had me on Ambien. They had me on cholesterol pills. And I was 32, 33, 35. So, it just...
I feel like they do push a lot of pills on people. That is big pharma. They're not trying to help people, in my opinion. I think they're more or less just trying to keep customers coming back. They don't want to cure anybody. They just want to keep that monthly check coming.
Exactly. Yes. And so for me, going off those medicines helped me greatly. I feel better. I'm not as sick. I do my ionic Bigfoot detoxes. I do my little tinctures with my herbs. But that's what I don't agree to. I don't agree to going on their pharmaceuticals or, living their lies. If what they were presenting to us was true and we could do something about it, we would. But what they're presenting to us is not true. So it's like they're trying to make us live a lie, and there's nothing you can do about it if it's not true.
Right.
So it kind of puts us in a circle, So, but yeah, I'll yield with all that, and deep love and gratitude for what you're doing, and thank you for helping. Thank you for helping the people, because not everybody has that heart, and that's special. So you are too, and I'm sure your kids are very blessed, and it's always nice to hear when kids have their mom and dad together, because it's so rare nowadays because of the family warfare that I see going on with the courts and the money they make from divorce. And
right. No, I'm grateful for my family, and I'm grateful for my children and everything we got. But I do want to say again, thank you guys, but we're going to wrap this one up. So thanks to Bob, thanks to Laura, and thanks for listening. We'll check you on the next one.